Welcome to, I think it's 11 o'clock here
Yes.
on the East Coast, to the panel. We're calling it's the Culinary Mystery Panel. What's the name of the panel?
Food for thought.
Food for thought. Food for thought. That's right. So I am your moderator. I'm Shawn Reilly Simmons. I am the author of 7 books in the Red Carpet Catering Mystery Series, which is, there's 7 of those. And my character is a chef that works on movie sets, which is a job that I've done before. So that was the inspiration for my series.
Oh,
But
fun.
it was cool. It was a lot of fun. I did it with my sister. She did it way more than I did, but I did get to do it with her. But I am only the moderator, so I'm just here to talk about you guys. So welcome to our panel.
Thank you.
All right.
Gee,
So
after that introduction, I want to hear all about you.
I know. We want to hear about your books too, Shawn.
well, I've also written a lot of culinary short stories. I was thinking about the other day because I have the books, but then I'm also like, the short story that did so well for me last year was totally a culinary story. It's about 2 people having dinner together. So I write a lot. I can't get away from the food thing. So that's why they asked me to do this. It's like all I think about is food and books and wine, basically. And
Me too.
So, all right, I'm going to get you guys introduced, and I'm going to go in the order that I can see you. So Gayle is at my top left. I don't know if that's the same for everyone, but here we go. Gayle Leeson is a pseudonym for Gayle Trent. We know Gayle Trent very well. Gayle has also written as Amanda Lee and in Gayle Trent. So she has to figure out what person she is that day when she sits down at her desk.
Exactly.
As Amanda Lee, she wrote the Embroidery Mystery Series. And as Gayle Trent, she writes the Daphne Martin Cake Mystery Series. I love cake so much. And the Myrtle Crumb Mystery Series. Going forward, Gayle intends to keep her writing until under the Gayle Leeson name. Yeah. As Gayle, she writes the Down South Cafe series and the Ghostly Fashionista Oh my God, the Ghostly Fashionista series. So you weren't joking when you said you were on deadline yesterday.
Right.
How many deadlines do you have a year? Like 17?
Quite a few.
A lot of books and names. Well, you're very putting us all to shame. Okay, and now down below Gayle for me is Maya, my good friend Maya. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. I always love seeing you. You're so fun. Maya Marianne Corrigan writes the 5 ingredient mysteries featuring a cafe manager and her grandfather solving murders in a Chesapeake Bay town. The 7th book in the series, Ginger Dead Man, came out last fall. Ginger Dead. I wouldn't have thought of that. That's pretty cool. Each book has 5 suspects, 5 clues, and Granddad's 5 ingredient recipes. Maya previously taught courses in writing, detective fiction, and American literature at Georgetown University and Nova. Besides reading and writing, she enjoys theater, travel, trivia, cooking, and crosswords. We'll get back to the travel eventually, hopefully very soon. If y'all didn't know, we're doing this virtually this year. We're not actually in Suffolk, Virginia, which normally we are. We're all in our homes, but we will travel one day again soon, hopefully. And then last but definitely not least is my good friend, Catherine. I love seeing you too. I always enjoy my time with you. Catherine is the USA Today bestselling author of Cookies and Chance Mysteries, the Italian Chef Mysteries, and the Cindy York Real Estate Mysteries. She lives in New York with her very patient husband, sons, and several spoiled pets. She wrote her first book, a highly plagiaristic version of Cinderella when she was 8 years old. but fortunately, Disney never sued.
I was lucky.
Yeah. Well, now you're an adult and you just said it out loud to like 500 people. So good luck. Her book, For Sale by Killer, won the 2019 Daphne du Maurier Award for Mainstream Mystery Suspense. So that's not too shabby either. You guys are just,
And that wasn't a culinary.
I know. Well, so I have
just like what you were saying about yours. So
yeah, a couple years ago, Catherine and I did at a bookstore together, and we catered it. We brought food, and
that was so much fun.
It was, and they sold tickets, and Catherine came all the way down from New York, and we're texting back and forth. She's like, "What should I make? Should I make?" I was like, "Make something Italian." I don't know. So I think she made penne, and it was a hit. Or did I make?
Well, you made the penne. I made the zucchini bars.
That's right.
Yes.
And I just not humble bragged about my own food. Sorry about that.
Zucchini bread. That's right. Yeah.
The penne was amazing. Oh, sorry.
It was. You made it.
Anyway, well, we're very glad to be here in this way, at least, that we can see each other and interact with you guys via Zoom. And of course, we'd love to be there hugging you in person, but someday we'll get back to that someday. So for now, here we are. But it is kind of cool because people that couldn't always get to, Suffolk will be here, hopefully enjoying talking with you guys and hearing you talk about your food and your books. So we came up with a few questions. Of course, we're open to if people want to ask questions, if I can keep up with the chat without looking like I'm spacing out the whole time. We can answer some from the audience as well. But the first question I had for the ladies is, what made you decide to write Culinary Mystery Series? And we'll start off with Gayle, so I can keep track of y'all. What made you start writing Culinary Mysteries?
It was just the food has always been a big part of my life. And I think a lot of times my stories kind of are based in memory. Like Amy in the book used to make, hi, Drew-Ann. I hope you're feeling well. We all love Drew-Ann Love. Do we not?
Yes, we do.
But anyway, like I remember Thanksgivings, especially, I would stand at my grandmother's side and she would be making the dressing and she would be like, okay, taste this. Does it have enough sage? And so that was my job. I was the taster. And in the book, Amy, after her Nana dies, she uses the money that her Nana left her to buy this cafe. And she only does breakfast and lunch, but she tries to integrate a lot of more avant-garde recipes to her rural Southern clientele. But and sometimes they go with it and sometimes they don't. She will make a new dish and she'll sample it to them. And then if they like it, she'll make it the next day for the special of the day. And if they don't, she knows not to put it on the menu. Like sushi didn't go over with the Southern clients. But it's a lot of fun because I'm able to write about kind of where I grew up and build on some fond memories.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think totally food is just such a connection for all of us to those memories and family and where you're from. And I always like to hear when people say dressing versus stuffing. I'm like, I know where you're from.
Exactly. When I first wrote that in one of the cake decorating mysteries, my New York editor said, what are you talking about? Salad dressing? And I was like, oh.
It's a big difference. They're not too far away,
Right.
Yeah, it's cool. Miss Maya, how did you get started with your culinary series?
Okay, I got started because food has always crept into anything I write. Back when I was teaching writing, I had a class one time, well, frequently we talked about little points of grammar or usage, and I would write sentences on the board. And after one class, one of the students came up to me and said, it's really bad for us to have an 11 a.m. class with you because every sentence you write has food in it. And I'd be teaching about dangling modifiers, and I'd come up with a sentence: running down the street, my ice cream cone fell. Which is the dangling modifier, but also has food. But any example I was giving, somehow it was always about food. So I really wanted to write a cozy mystery, and I don't have any cats. I can't do anything crafty, but food is something I've been dealing with all my life. It was important in my family. And so it seemed a natural thing to go into that. And interestingly enough, I also have a character who runs a cafe and only does breakfast and lunch because, after all, our characters need time to find murderers.
Right.
So that leaves
Very important.
Yes, leaves the rest of the afternoon for sleuthing. So
Exactly.
that's my story.
Yeah, it keeps food costs down too in fictional and in real life. Well, so they always say don't go to the grocery store hungry because you'll end up spending like $100 more. Don't go to Miss Corrigan's class hungry, or you'll or you'll end up writing about food all the rest of the day. So, okay, Catherine, how did you get started? What made you decide to write a culinary mystery series?
I think it was pretty much the same for me. I mean, obviously, I love food. I've always been surrounded by it. My father was born in Sicily, and his grandmother, my grandmother, his mother, was a fabulous cook. She could make everything from brujol to her own wine. And when I was growing up, we had grapes in our backyard on vines, and my father would give them to her and she'd make wine from them. And I was allowed to taste now and then too, even though I was underage. Oh, I probably should have said that, but anyway. So I do remember this one time. It's so funny because like you weren't allowed to leave my house hungry. I mean, and I find I'm doing the same thing. Like my oldest son lives on his own now, and I always have him go home with something. It's just in the nature, I guess, of being Italian. But I remember this one story when I was a little girl. My friend from next door came over on Thanksgiving, and she had just eaten dinner. And my father, come on, sit down, eat. Oh no, thank you, Mr. Adele. I've already eaten. I'm not hungry. Oh, come on. So he made her eat a whole dinner, and she left the house and thought that she was going to die. She said, "I'm never going over to your house on Thanksgiving again." So it's just something been surrounded by all my life, especially in the past year. It's been a comfort for everyone too, I think. I mean, we all need that comfort right now, especially, and I enjoy doing it.
Absolutely. Well, you do a good job at it. Yeah, my step grandmother was Italian from Italy, and we learned, because we were older when we met her. We were little children. We were like 10 or 11 something. But you learned pretty early, don't eat until you're full the first time she gives you food, because she's always going to want to give you seconds. And if you say no, her feelings are so
Or
hurt. If you don't
thirds.
want, oh yeah. She's like, so we learned real quick to like eat small and then eat more. So she wouldn't get all upset with us. So yeah, it's a thing. So I'm going to start with somebody else gets to go first. So you're not always like the third person answering the question.
Doesn't matter.
That's nice. So my second question is, what role has food played in your life outside of writing? So this is, I guess we kind of touched on it a little bit before with our experiences. Maybe think about a very specific instance of where food really meant something to you growing up or your wedding day or whatever it is. And we can start with Maya this time.
Ooh, well,
Outside of your writing.
food, I come from a family of food obsessed people, and my grandmother was a great cook, my mother was a great cook, and it just runs in the family. I had a brother and sister, and my brother, when he was a bachelor in his 20s, took Chinese cooking classes, and so it's always been a part of our lives. And dinner was the most important event every day. My father owned a business, and we never ate dinner until he came home, and my mother would hold it. It was what we did, and how we got together at the end of the day. So I continued that when I had a family. And in a way, it kind of creeps into my writing, because table scenes are really important in my book. All my books, when people are sitting around, they reveal who they are by not just, what they eat and how they eat, but that's part of it, but, the conversation and how they interact with other people. So I think the family dinner is really what motivates me, even as I'm writing, and not just our family dinners. All the suspects are sitting around eating things in my book too. So I think that table business is very important, maybe even more important than the cooking part of it, is getting people sitting around the table and interacting.
Absolutely. And I think you can do a lot of character development through how, like Gayle was saying, like, she uses a different word for dressing and stuffing, but, you can tell about a character without having to do a bunch of exposition about the character. Someone puts a napkin in their lap as opposed to putting it in their collar, when they sit down to eat, you can kind of oh, I wonder what their family was like, or, it's just kind of a cool, for writers, I think it's a cool way to, with show, not tell. So Gail, can you give us some insight into how food played a role in your life outside of your writing?
To me, food is comfort. I know that's a bad thing in a lot of situations, but it really is. For example, several years ago, my husband's job, they moved to Mexico. So he was laid off, and he came home and he told us, and he was just, I've gotten laid off, And I said, come on, kids, let's go out to eat. And my husband is like, I just told you I was laid off. But I said, no, this is hope. This signifies we have faith. Something better is going to come along. This is an opportunity. You're out of that now. You get to go do something new. We're going out to eat. And we turned it into like a celebration for the kids, because I was thought too, I'm not going to scare the kids, So this happened, but we're going to be okay. And
that's really great.
So even whether things are really good happen or really bad happen, is let's go out to eat.
Right.
Let's go celebrate.
Yeah. Food goes with every occasion. If you have food at your wedding, there's food after a funeral, it's just everyone, there's food everywhere. Yeah. That's a great story. I love that story. Something similar happened to us, and it just opened up a different opportunity, and it was actually a good thing, So it's good to look past the hard moments into the good times, and food will get you there. Yay.
Exactly.
All right, Catherine, lay it on us. What's your big moment?
Well, I suppose this isn't maybe a real positive one as far as food goes, but it's just popped right up in my memories. When I was 18, I went on a trip to Spain with some classmates, and I just remember being so hungry that whole trip, because I wasn't crazy about the cuisine there. And of course, this was a school trip, and they put us up in like the shoddiest hotels. And I had paella for the first time ever. And it came with a shrimp on top of it that had all its claws still intact. And I was just totally grossed out by the whole thing, that I could not eat. And all my friends were like poking me with the shrimp all during dinner and everything, because they knew I was so upset by it. And my parents had given me, a fairly good sum of money to bring with me. And, I was 17 at the time, and they had casinos there. There was no age limits there. There was no age limits of what you could drink, when you could drink. And there was sangria at every meal. There was also, we got a roll with every meal too. And we were outside a lot of times, and there was always like a bug on it or something. So, I mean, this was 30 some years ago. I'm sure it's changed since then, but I lost 7 pounds in 1 week on that trip.
I need to go to Spain.
Yeah.
And like I said, they had the casinos, and I went in there one day and I like blew almost all my money. So on the way home, I had no cash. I was like starving. I mean, I guzzled down all the airplane food and everything. And when I got home, I just remember thinking that I never would take the, dinner that my mother made. And she really didn't like to cook either, but I was like, I'm never going to take this for granted again. I mean, it's just something that I've always remembered.
So did your parents say, make good choices when you go on your trips? Catherine's choices. That's cute. Well, and food can give us a scarring kind of memory as well, or a horror show memory like you just had. So
don't skimp on the details of your trip. If you're going to travel, do it right. So.
That's so funny that you still remember the fine details of that.
Oh, yes.
That experience and shared it with all of us. We have a question. I saw it earlier in the chat. Somebody wanted to know if are you guys okay with taking a question early from the room? Somebody wanted to know, do you have any advice for beginning writers? I think that's a really great question. So Catherine, do you have any advice for beginning writers?
Oh, I do. I would say don't do what I did and procrastinate for like over 20 years before writing your first book. I always knew I wanted to be a writer, but I never actually wrote my first book until I was in my 40s. And I just would make excuses every day for not writing. I guess I was afraid on some level. So I would say just start out maybe with one paragraph a day. The next day, write a page. Before you know it, you'll have a book. And the more you write, I truly believe this, the better you do become at it. So
Yeah, that's a great advice. Maya, what's your advice for beginning writers?
My advice is to join a group of writers. For example, as mystery writers, many of us are members of Sisters in Crime or Mystery Writers of America. And there are so many opportunities to learn how to write the particular type of book you want to write. I mean, there are science fiction groups, there are horror writers, there are all kinds of groups of people who provide educational opportunities. And for me, that was really important. I mean, I've written all my life. I wrote a lot of nonfiction, when I was teaching, and I didn't know how to write a mystery book. But through the group, through Sisters in Crime and Mystery Writers of America, I took workshops and got to learn the specific techniques of this type of writing. Second piece of advice I give is to get yourself a group of people, a critique group, where you share what you were writing with other people, because we all think we know what we've said, but until somebody else reads it, we don't know if we've actually said that. And finally, persist, because the difference between a published writer and an unpublished writer is persistence.
Very good. Yeah, all those are great points. And Gayle, what is your advice for someone starting out?
Well, I second what Catherine and Maya said, but I'll also add, number one, read, but number two, don't be dissuaded, because there are so many people, like for example, I was at a writers conference 2 years ago. Of course, it wasn't last year, but there was a young girl there, and she said she and a friend read each other's manuscripts, and that she tried to be very helpful to her friend, but her friend hurts her feelings. And I said, then get another partner. That's not the person for you. Constructive criticism and hurting your feelings are two very different things. If she's not helping you grow your story, but instead she is, well, that's stupid, or well, that would, that's not the kind of person you need. And I gave her my number, and I was like, calm down. She was so young, and I was like, this sweet baby.
I know. Oh God. Yeah, don't do that, person. Well, and I think it's a skill to give constructive criticism and feedback. It's part of, it's just some people can't do it. But I would add to that, and that's a very, very good point. And that was great advice for her and for everyone. But on the other side of that, don't ask like your mom or your husband to be your person, because they're like, oh, it's wonderful, everything is great. Like they're going to say that because they don't want to hurt your feelings, or they don't want to get in trouble with you, and they also think that you're wonderful and everything you do is great. So I always tell the story. My son is 10. When I've always been a very blonde I grew up in Florida, like I'm a beachy blonde person. And I had my son, and for some reason, my hairdresser talked me into dyeing my hair the same color as Catherine's hair, like dark black, I just was like, oh, that sounds good. Go ahead. Because I was like baby mush brain. I'm like, oh yeah, I need to change, So that happened. And then I showed up at Thanksgiving, and my husband has this huge Irish family. And they were like, oh, hey, God, and then his Aunt Ildy, who was in her son, she's like, it looks terrible. She goes, I love you. It looks terrible. I'm like, hey,
no.
But she said it like in the sweetest way. And I was like, hey, I wrote a manuscript. Would you read it for me? Because I know you're going to be nice and you're going to tell me the truth. So she was my reader. She read all the stuff, and she would say it very gently. Like, I don't think Penelope would swear in this situation. I'm like, oh, because she really, she had an objective enough opinion that she wasn't worried about hurting my feelings, but she delivered the bad news in a gentle way. over a glass of
have a-
wine.
I have a friend like that. She's one of my beta readers. She's read every one of my books, and I love her dearly. But she is very honest with me and very frank. If she doesn't like something in there, she will tell me, and she's been so helpful. I mean,
Yeah.
she's not afraid to hurt my feelings. And I think that if you want to be a writer, you want to be an author, you have to, excuse me, develop thick skin. And it's hard because I still get reviews that hurt my feelings. Everybody does, but at a certain point, you have to try to get past that and think, is this what I want to do or not? I mean, your work is on display for everyone, so
Yeah.
you just have to deal with it.
Yeah, you're not going to make not everyone's going to love every single
No,
thing you do
no,
in
they're
any part
not.
of your life, but it is hard when you put yourself out there. But it's good to find that honest, kind feedback person that you can, who's not just going to tell you stuff's great, but also is going to hurt your feelings. So that's a sweet spot in there. So go find that person. Okay. The third question we had talked about before was, what comes first for you, the plot or the characters, when you're setting out on a new project? I'm going to ask, I can't wait to hear what Gayle says about this, because you write all these series. So you have to let us know what comes first for you, the plot or the characters.
Characters, because and just to sidestep the culinary mysteries for just 1 second, with the ghostly fashionistas, when I decided to set my story in Abingdon, I thought every building in Abingdon is over 100 years old, so there's got to be a ghost. Well, back to the cozies, when I was in the cafe, every southern town has like the person everybody knows, who is eccentric, and that's a nice way to put it. But so in my book, I have Homer Pickens, who picks a hero every day because his father abandoned him when he was young. So he has a photographic memory, so he can come up with quotes that go with whatever's going on in the mystery. But I wanted to make him eccentric, yes, but also not a dumb character or a caricature, but just someone that could bring something to the story. For example, in Truffles and Tragedy, which will be out on the 16th, Amy does something that Homer doesn't agree with, and he tells her in a quote from Madeline L'Engle, no, I don't think you should have done that. And she feels really bad. And she says, well, I would have, and he says, well, go ahead and make the call. I'll wait. So he is kind of like the wise old man, and but he is a very eccentric character. And then also with Aunt Bess, she's 82 and she's very outspoken, because everybody, the best old ladies are these outspoken old ladies. My grandmother once came over to my house, and one of the neighbors gave us some watermelon. And my grandmother said, because grandmother never put a bite in her mouth that she didn't say grace. So she said, Lord, thank you for this good watermelon. And the woman turned around, the neighbor, and said, well, honey, you're welcome. And grandmother said, you're not the Lord. It was very embarrassing, but very funny, because grandmother just said what she thought. And that was kind of like, so does Aunt Bess. So I really love doing that with her, because Aunt Bess can get away with things nobody else in the story can get away with.
I bet. And I bet you can hear her accent coming through just in your mind when you're reading,
Right.
That's another regional kind of thing. So Maya, characters or plot first?
Well, between the two of them, characters. If I know, I read a book by, Elizabeth George, who suggested before you write anything, before you write your book or even start plotting, you figure out who your characters are and what they want most. What is their goal? And so if you have that in mind, then any scene that character is in, it becomes obvious what the character is going to say and do. So character first, but I even go a step back with a mystery series because aside from the, kind of quirky characters like my sleuth's grandfather, who's always there, you've got this whole set of suspects that you've got to bring in, and you need to know their goals. But I try to center every book on a theme, so that each of the characters in it has some relationship to that theme. So for example, I have a book called Final Fondue, and it's chocolate fondue, and it's associated with Valentine's Day and love. And so the whole story is about love and triangles, love triangles. And even my main characters get to have a position with respect to triangles. So the theme is kind of always in the back of the story. Same thing with the latest book, Ginger Dead Man, which is a Christmas book. And of course, we've already got all kinds of associations with Christmas. But, for me, it was, gift giving and Santa and Charles Dickens, who you can't go through Christmas without seeing A Christmas Carol. So I wanted to explore how the sinister side of each of those things. And there is a sinister side to Santa in history as well as in my book. So, the theme is something that imbues the whole book and pulls the characters and the plot together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have I might not have the only kid that felt this way, but my son is 10. He didn't want Santa Claus coming in and seeing him when he was asleep. He's like, I don't want him coming in my room. Like, he was totally freaked out by the whole idea of like this strange person coming in the house while we're all sleeping. Like, yeah, that's weird. Why is that the thing that we do? So, but yes, there is a sinister side to Santa for sure.
Yes.
Just in the mind of an active mind of a 6-year-old. Catherine, characters or plot?
I was just going to say what Maya was saying about Santa. It's so funny because I have one Christmas cozy in my Cookies and Chance series. I'll actually have another one out next year on the Italian Chef called The Enemy You Gnocchi. And in each one, I know, you got to love the titles. In each one of them, Santa's portrayed, I don't want to say negative way, but in the first book, Ginger Snapped to Death, the main character is carjacked by 2 guys dressed like Santa. And then in this latest one, there's a man who's dressed up as Santa. He's not a very nice man, and he is actually, he's the victim. So it's just kind of different. It's this is to say you can portray Santa in so many different ways. I better not talk about that anymore. But anyway, so as far as I would say it's a little of both for me, a little bit of the plot and the characters. I find that I always have to know right away who the victim is, who the killer is, the reason, although sometimes the plot gets a little muddled for me, and I need to work out some of the kinks. And then the characters kind of evolve around it. I mean, I know who the main character is. Another technique that I use, I don't know that it would work for everybody, is, with the Cookies and Chance series, which I have book 10 coming out in May. I always like the title. I try to think of the title first. With my other series, it's a traditional series, so the publisher usually has a say in the title. But in this series, my publisher, Gemma Halliday, has always let me come up with my own titles. And I like to come up with the title first because I feel that it can encompass the theme. I like to do that. Like, I had one book called Crumbled to Pieces, and in it, her life is kind of crumbling around her. Oh. There's another book called Frosted with Revenge, when she's getting married, and she is a bakery owner, and someone is out to kill her before she can reach her wedding day. So I always find that helps me quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, speaking of titles, someone in the chat there's a very lively discussion going on over there about death ham and funeral potatoes and killing Santa. So this is like, we got a fun audience right now.
But he wasn't a nice Santa, so.
Right. Well, we've all seen Elf. We've seen the movies. We know it's some, sometimes it's just some bum that sits there. That's Santa. For all the kids out there, Santa's wonderful. Don't worry about it. It's fine. So someone in the chat asked before all the Death Potato comments was, how do you guys feel, talking about titles, how do you guys feel about when you have a book coming out and there's someone that has the same title as yours? Like, do you plot revenge or murder or what happens? Anyone can take this one because it has happened to me, but I
It's
didn't have
happened to me.
What happened?
Well, it's funny. My first book in the Cookies and Chance series, when it came out in 2015, it's called Tastes Like Murder. And then I did somewhere, I was stumbling along Amazon last year, the year before, and I found that there was a Taste Like Murder. And of course, my first reaction was, oh, how dare someone have the same title as me? But they're not copyrighted, so anyone can use the same title. And it's funny because I did see that when It Can Only Be Murder came out, this the second book in my Italian chef series, there was already an It Can Only Be Murder, and my publisher had said, well, what do you think about that for a title? And I said, well, I love it, but I have seen that before. Someone who was self-published, I believe, had the same title, but basically, I think the book was out of print, or so they wanted to go ahead with that. I mean, there are no rules. You can do it, but in some ways too, if the other one has been a really good seller, I don't think you'd want to have the same title, because that's going to might take away from yours. So you just have to go with the flow. There's really nothing you can do about it unless you, I know my publisher has a high heel series, Gemma Halliday, and she has it copyrighted. So other people aren't allowed to use high heels in their title, but for most people, they don't do that. So you really.
That's interesting. That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah. You really can't do anything about it. So
yeah, but it's like you were saying, I always thought that was kind of weird because it's like, well, here's my new book coming out next week, The Color Purple. It's like, well, why would you do like you can't
exactly.
do that? But I understand the reasoning behind it. Does anyone else, do you, Maya or Gayle, have a anecdote about that?
I was at a, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, nobody has used a title. I always check before I give a book a title whether it's been used before, and so far nobody has reused the title I had. However, I noticed a question over there that's related, which was over in the chat. Do you always write the book and then come up with the title? And I think Catherine probably answered this as well. The title is part of the inspiration for what happens in the book. So I need my title, and sometimes the title actually has determined what was in the book. I have a book called The Telltale Tart, and before I had that title, I knew I wanted to write a book about, well, maybe the dark side of publishing, let's put it like that. And I always have a bunch of titles that I go through, and that had been one I thought of, and I said, oh, this is perfect because it's a connection to Poe. And Poe had a terrible time with publishers. And what it did was just, explode into this whole story of people who are obsessed with Poe, even in the present day, and it really was the thread that kept that united everybody. It was the theme, and it all started with the title.
Very good. And Gayle?
I was at a conference one year and mentioned that my book, Murder Takes the Cake, was getting ready to come out. And the woman I was talking to said, no, because her book, Murder Takes the Cake, was in production and they came out at about the same time.
Wow.
That's crazy. Yeah, I wrote one called Murder on the Rocks, and there might be 9 of those on Amazon right now. So. But my thing was like, I just wanted to be the top one, or like in the top 3. I don't want to be in the 9th one, because then that more people are looking at it, buying it, whatever. So that's the only thing you can do is sort of like root for yourself to do better than the other ones. But everyone over here they're hilarious. Somebody said, I have a Mad Max mystery series about a grandmother who solves crimes and without a single explosion or race across the desert. So this is a lively conversation going on.
We'll be able to see the chat after we finish it.
Yeah.
With these people.
Yeah.
Great.
This is all recorded for the rest of our lives. So don't make a mistake or say anything weird. I'm just kidding.
I always make mistakes and say things weird.
I know, I do too. That's sort of my
life.
That's my brand. Okay. So my next question for y'all is, how big of a role does food play in your stories? So we kind of touched a little bit on this already, but like more specifically, do you think it's one of the tasks of a culinary writer to evoke readers' senses through how you describe your food? So we're kind of coming back to the culinary question. How big of a role does food play in your books? And we can start with Catherine.
I would say it plays a very big part, obviously. I actually have 3 series that are culinary. I didn't mention my Aloha Lagoon series, which is a multi-author series. I have 2 books in that, and the main character is a waitress working in Hawaii. And she, not only can she not cook, she can't waitress, but that's another story. So while she is not directly a chef or an owner or anything, it still plays a huge part, because as a waitress, she is around food all day. It's a huge part of her life. She's kind of living on, well, she basically has no money. So she's looking for handouts wherever she can get them. And she becomes very good friends with the chef there. And he there's one scene where he's cutting up pineapple, and she's never tasted fresh pineapple before. She's only had canned, and it really evokes a lot of senses. And I remember when I was writing that line, I thought about the taste too. I've actually been to Hawaii a couple of times and just love it there. So I was thrilled to write a book set in that. But I would say, yeah, I mean, my main character in the Italian Chef series is a chef, obviously. Sally from the Cookies and Chance owns a bakery. So of course, there's going to be a huge food in those, but there's different ways you can portray that relationship. And I think that the Aloha Lagoon series, for me, that was a different one. So yeah, I would say, and I think you should evoke the senses for the reader. You want them to experience that. You want to make your series make people hungry, I think. And there's always recipes too, if they want to try them out. So
Yeah, that was one of the questions too. I'll circle back around to that. And then, yeah, so because that's not a thing in every book. So there is a piece that you have to focus on the food, because it's a culinary mystery. And I think people come for the mystery and they stay for the food, right?
exactly.
How do you feel about that, Gayle? That question?
Oh, I think that's right. And when I try to introduce a new dish or two in each book. And actually, with the first cafe book, I wanted to try oatmeal pie. And I had no recipe. So I sent out to my newsletter, does anybody have a recipe for this? And so it was a very Southern thing. It's kind of like, if you've never tasted it, it's almost like a pecan pie without pecans and with oatmeal instead. Wonderful. And especially after all the ingredients get together, you know what I mean? They settle overnight or something.
Incorporate.
Then, yeah, it's better the next day than it is the day that you bake it. And so that was a new experience for me, as well as the readers, because that was really fun. It was something, and I included that recipe, and we still love it. My husband was like, around Christmas, are you going to make one of those oatmeal pies?
So it's like a beef. But a friend of mine from Scotland's here, Wendy's here, and I was hanging out with a British friend, and they talked about beef and ale pie. I'm like, what? The beef and ale pie is like, a big thing over there, and I have to try that. Sounds great. What's not to like? Beef and ale and pie, much like oatmeal pie. And then after Maya answers this one piece, we'll go back and talk about recipes after this. Maya, what's your thoughts on the role of food in your books?
Mhm. I've already talked about the importance of table scenes, and I think I have, a really big, crucial scene at the table in every single book, except maybe the first one. The other way I bring food in is because Val's granddad, after she moves in with him in the first book of the series, she's there to put him on a healthier diet, and he doesn't much care for it. So he decides he's going to learn how to cook, but he won't try any recipe with more than 5 ingredients. So he gives the name of the series, with his way of cooking. But increasingly, as he gets better at cooking, his first, in the first few books, we have a number of kitchen disasters, but he gets better at it. And he and Val spend a lot of time in the kitchen together. They live in the same house. They're often making dinner together. They eat together. They clean up afterwards. And this is the time when they talk about the suspects that each of them have talked to during the day, and they share the information and they try to reach tentative conclusions about who done it. And it's always done, it's often done in the kitchen, and you can get a lot of feeling into what you're doing in the kitchen. I mean, if Granddad doesn't like something that's happening, he'll slap the crab cake down into the frying pan, and just kind of little things like that. So they're doing something as they're discussing suspects, and the things that they're doing have to do with the food they're cooking, and their different techniques. So Granddad's very good at filleting fish, for example. And so, there's a lot to that. There's scraping off the scales. You can do, have a lot of action going on with the food.
Absolutely. Okay, so real quick, because we are getting to the end of our time, and I also want to hear from each of you what you have coming up next. So real quick, recipes in your books. Maya, do you have recipes in your books? And have you
do.
subjected your family to them? Do you test them out on your family?
Yes, I always test them out. I always test them out on my family. Sometimes I have friends try them. A lot of them are family recipes that I've modified a little bit. But I do something new, like for the Telltale Tart, I did a tart tatin, which is a really hard thing to do. And of course, I'm always up against the deadline, and I made it for the first time the day my book was due. And unfortunately, it turned out really well, but that's what I was doing at 5 o'clock on the day my manuscript was due. Crazy.
Catherine, do you have recipes in your books, and do you try them out on
Yes.
Frank? Yeah.
All of us. Yes, Frank's my guinea pig. I have recipes in all of my culinaries. I recently made gnocchi for the first time for the enemy gnocchi, and it was easier than I thought. And everyone enjoyed it. And my son, who loves anything pasta, keeps saying, "Okay, when are we getting homemade pasta again?" And I said, "Well, maybe when I don't have a deadline."
Yeah, exactly. Miss Gayle, you have recipes?
Yes. And sometimes I put links because I don't have a recipe for something, so I will link to a blogger or sometimes I get permission ahead of time from the blogger, and I will just include their recipe and their information in the back of the book. But otherwise, I'll just put a link and say, try this one. This is a good one. Try this.
Yeah. Okay, we have a few minutes left. So can each of you, starting with Gayle, tell us where we can see you next and what's going on, what books are coming out? What's up next for you?
Troubles and Tragedy is coming up on March 16th. And funnily enough, it features a woman whose professor is killed during an online class.
Oh.
So, and it came about, through something like this, because I thought, wouldn't it be awful if one of us was murdered and the rest of us saw it happen? So it is Amy's cousin, Jackie, who is going back to school. And as luck would have it, she has Amy presenting to her business class about running her own business. So Amy is a witness as well.
Oh my. Yeah, that's way worse than seeing someone walk by in their underwear behind you, which I have seen. So it's not good. Maya, what's next for you?
I'm working on the 8th book in the series, and Val and Granddad are not in their own kitchen for this, and I'm really missing the opportunity for them to interact. But they're at a hotel for a weekend, and it happens to be a hotel where there are a couple of unsolved murders took place, one a long time ago, one a year before. And it's actually based on a real murder that took place on the Eastern Shore about 20 or so years ago, in which a group of people went to a murder mystery dinner at the hotel, and some of them were staying the whole weekend. And after the murder mystery dinner, a couple were arguing at the dinner, and the next thing that happened is one of them was dead up in the hotel room. I don't know if you remember this, Shawn, but it happened in St. Michael's in Maryland. And so it was a really interesting situation that these people actually did what they were pretending to do over dinner.